Airbnb family, I've discovered some pricing flaws in pricing softwares. I use 3 of them right now. Did you know that? And I'm pricing hundreds of listings across the country, and I found a flaw that has to do with holiday pricing and slow season pricing. And this video will probably blow your mind. And I want to share it with you immediately because you guys need to make some immediate changes. At least know something about your software right now that'll save you thousands of dollars in the future. Have you ever had a booking, or actually, have you ever not gotten a booking where your software said, hey, we really feel optimistic about these dates, raise your rates, and then you go unbooked? I mean, it's happened to all of us, right? If you have a pricing software, you know this phenomenon. And this is becoming more and more apparent, right? This is happening more frequently with my students and properties that I do pricing for. And so here's the backstory of what's going on. Pricing softwares, they call them algorithms, but I think they're just protocols. Okay, I'm gonna try to explain by the end of this video. This video will make you smarter, I promise. My name's Sean Rocky Geach, hosted for 10 years, coach for 8. The students are super nerdy like me. We have a blast, okay? So why a pricing software is just a protocol. These softwares don't machine learn and get smarter and grow and make changes and adapt, right? GPO on Guesty is trying to do something that's a little bit more market dynamic, but still, they're still figuring it out. And so pricing softwares were really powerful back in the day because people didn't change their prices. Like, I even have a student in Finland right now who nobody changes their prices. So his life is super easy. And a pricing software will identify what they assume to be static markets, right? This is where it makes one of its mistakes. A pricing software will go, well, this market's full of a bunch of dum-dums, and then it's full of people who use our software. That's binary for them. There's us versus them, and the them is a very generic pool. So when an event comes up, they're like, we should raise our rates. And it looks at the market and analyzes people's rates in the market and says, we should raise our rates a little bit or a lot of it based on the event. And this is actually a mistake now, okay? Because the price labs or wheelhouse or the people raising rates, they're raising it dependent on this increase of demand. And then they go look at the market and go, okay, so if we normally get booked at 50 percentile, like the median price in a market, and then because an event, there's going to be increase in demand, we believe will be like the top 20%, it's going to reposition you from the 50th percentile to the 20th percentile or above, not taking into account that the market's actually shifting for the event too. Because the presence of multiple pricing softwares has led to basically people missing the bullseye in a way. So I'm going to try to say this in as normal, non-ADHD way as I can say this, okay? So you guys can keep up. The price in a market is $100, right? And you're $100, everybody else is $100. Now, in a normal environment, price labs will go, oh, there's an event. Let's raise to 200 because the market's at 1, okay? Let's raise to 200, that's what you'll get. Now, imagine a market where there's 4 different pricing softwares and Guesty's GPO puts people at 170, Wheelhouse puts people at like 155, Beyond Pricing puts people at like 190. So now Price Labs is like, we want to actually be double of your competition because it's an event. So then they go average everybody who's no longer 100, but the average price is like 165. So instead of making you 200, which might have worked, they make you 360, which now won't work, right? This is a potential flaw in active softwares right now. Because software's taken us versus everybody else approach, they don't consider that other houses are running any elegant pricing strategy and have made any adjustments for the events that they're making adjustments for. This is one thing that I think is wrong. Slow season, they make a similar mistake, which is that they're like a balancing algorithm, right? So in slow season, there's not enough customers, but there's tons of people on Price Labs. So let's say there's 100 houses in a market. And like Price Labs goes, we need to go down to $400 a night to get booked. But there's 100 houses that they drop to 400, okay? And then there's only gonna be 20 customers in the winter, right? Well, Price Labs isn't gonna take 20 of those customers and drop it down, right? They're not gonna feed those 20 and let the other 80 die. They don't get to make those decisions. So they're gonna just balance the 100 against each other, and whoever wins, wins. But the hosts that know would actually need to deviate farther in order to make sure that they get booked, because Price Labs is just going to balance everybody. All their customers get an equal shot. There's not going to be a level 2 deviation for the couple smart Airbnb hosts inside of Price Labs that know that they need to do more. So that's something that we have to do. We have to kind of go to war against our neighbors on Price Labs in that case. So I use Guesty GPO, I use Price Labs, and I use Airbnb's data to do my pricing. I have 3 multiple data points that I pull from every single day. And what's further starting to become a problem that pricing softwares don't understand, none of them understand this. This is kind of the same problem that AIRDNA has when it does market comps, is it doesn't understand market fit for listings based on consumer preferences, right? So AIRDNA will go, we think this property is making a ton of money, but it can't actually tell you why. It's gonna be like, oh, it's a 4-bedroom house, so 4-bedroom houses must be making money. But the fact that the 4-bedroom house looks like a chapel, or the 4-bedroom house has like a bungee system where people can go bungee jumping into the lake behind the house or something crazy. This is something AIRDNA can't tell you, right? It can't crunch that data. So what we're finding is all holidays are not created equal for the same properties. Okay, so for example, your property might have a rooftop deck, might have a hot tub and a pool and a barbecue grill, perfect for 4th of July, right? But your house doesn't have a beautiful big kitchen with a kitchen island where it's really easy to cook, and you don't have a table that can sit 10. So you're not gonna be a good Thanksgiving property, right? You don't have a fireplace that you can have a picturesque like Christmas tree fireplace, kind of Santa unwrapping gifts in the living room kind of house. So you're not gonna be good for Christmas, right? But your Price Lab software, or GPO, or Wheelhouse is gonna, for all 3 events, tell you to raise your rates in all 3 circumstances, even though you're only a good fit for one. Now, if you take the bait and double your price with all 3 holidays, you're gonna get booked on one, and you're gonna totally strike out on the other 2. You could have got maybe 10% more or 5% more for the other dates because there is a legitimate increase in demand potentially, but you're just not the right property for the job, are you? Right? So this is going to be a big change that I think hosts need to start to discern, is recognize when pricing software's over optimism for blanket protocols doesn't apply to you specifically. I've got another student in Atlanta, and she, like in Atlanta, there's a lot of events, right? So Price Labs does this to her all the time. Price spikes all over the place. But she's a little closer to the airport and she's not close enough to downtown. So for certain events where it said your price should be over $1,000 a night, she didn't get it because she was too far away to actually be relevant. So yesterday on my coaching session, went 6 hours by the way, we came up with this kind of like this metaphor. Imagine a Taylor Swift concert comes to your town and the event is like a crashing of demand, like a seismic event, like an earthquake that actually hits the venue, right? So like imagine the Eiffel Tower as an event. Just imagine like the hand of God coming down and hitting the Eiffel Tower and creating an earthquake. Well, from that epicenter, the ripples get smaller as it gets further and further away, right? Which is the demand effect. The demand effect gets smaller the further you go from the location of the event. So if there's a Taylor Swift concert and your house is across the street, you make all of the money. But if there's a Taylor Swift concert and you're 3.5, 4 miles away, you might get a little extra, but you're not gonna make all of the money. You will not nearly get the same enrichment as the person across the street. Does that make sense? Right? I hope it does make sense for you guys. So now when Price Labs or Wheelhouse or GPO says there's an event at this location, I want you to draw a line and I want you to look at all of the properties that are between you and the location, okay? And if you start to do searches on map view and see that everything else is booking up and there's nothing left available, you could then become a better location because you're left over, but everything else that was better location is gone. You might as well be on Broadway, right? If that happens. But if you watch your market and everything is like booking up more slowly, not nearly the optimism that Price Labs or Wheelhouse or GPO thinks, and there's all these properties between you and the Taylor Swift concert, just like Scottsdale, Phoenix for the Super Bowl, where everybody got too greedy and half the Airbnbs were empty. If that ends up being the case, you actually have to go to war and fight for price. You're gonna have to fight on price. Even though Price Labs said, let's triple our price, they got over optimistic and they made a mistake because they told you that you have the same shot as the person across the street from the venue. That's gonna be a big deal. So the 2 things that I just mentioned that I want to go back and I want you to write these things down. If you are in a market that has holidays or if you're in a market that has events, I want you to ask, what type of property is best for this holiday or for this event? Who's the customer for it? And is my house actually relevant? Because if my house is not relevant, I will need to like temper, let's use the word temper, the price spike from Price Labs. And then also, how location relevant am I for this event or this holiday? So for example, New York Rockefeller Center, everybody wants to go to the tree. Or Chicago, everybody wants to go to the water and watch the fireworks for 4th of July or something like that. There are holidays that are extremely event driven too. And if you notice that you don't actually have the location relevance, you will again have to temper it down. So my pro tips for you guys, I want you in 2025 to start looking at pricing softwares like just protocols. They did like a price goes up for one reason, but that reason is a dumb reason. It's like, we think it's gonna go up for whatever silly toolbox we have that we're hiding from you, right? Where prices go up, prices go down. It's just, imagine like the monkey with the symbols, okay? Price Labs is as intelligent as the monkey with the symbols, and I need you guys to think like that. No longer trust your pricing software, okay? And I want you to look at when it, like, you can even journal this down. If you want this to be really easy, start to take a journal and write this down. Price Labs says my weekends should go up and my weekdays should go down by this much. It says this or whatever, I don't understand, but you journal it. And then 2 weeks later, because you don't have to understand why, but 2 weeks later go, Price Labs was right or Price Labs was wrong, okay? That's all you need to know, end of funnel. You don't have to know everything in the middle. You don't need to know what the magic box is doing to your listing, but you can write, Price Labs want my listing to be $600 on weekends. 1 month later, Price Labs was terrible. Price Labs is super wrong. And if you can journal what's working and what's not working, you don't necessarily need to know. You just need to know the end result of the price. And if you guys want to talk about your listing and say, I think my listing is special for this reason or that reason, or I think my listing has a problem for this reason or that reason, I'm available. We can have those conversations. I do that with my students all the time. That's why my coaching on Saturdays goes 6 to 8 hours, because we'll look at people's listings and go, well, your listing is behind here, here, and here. You're in a market that needs more family stuff, so let's work on your kitchen, let's do this, you need a crib, whatever. And we have these really long conversations about finding ways to win relevancy in markets, right? So the one thing I do want to gift you before the end of this video is this concept of we're gonna make up a phrase, okay? There is a price home, and then there is your price. And there's a distance between those dots, okay? When Price Labs or Wheelhouse moves your price, it's moving it in relationship to the price home. This is a number that you don't know yet, right? You're learning pricing strategy. You don't know what your perfect price is, right? Apparently neither does Price Labs, because you're over here. You are exactly $80 away. And when the market goes up, 80 bucks, you're still gonna be $80 away. If it goes down, you're still gonna be $80 away, because you are a certain distance from the bullseye, okay? So what we need to do, level 1, is calibrate your base price to get as close to price home as possible. And what will happen is when you find the right price home, Price Labs will still push you up and down. So will like Guesty GPO, but you'll start to see bookings 5 days out, 80 days out, 12 days out. You're gonna start to see random bookings everywhere. And they don't have to be a lot of bookings. But imagine you play piano. You want your fingers on the keys and you wanna be able to cover the whole keyboard. So by finding our price home, we're placing our hands on the keys, and now anywhere that we apply pressure, we'll get a response. Does that make sense? So we want to be floating just above where we're going to get bookings across your entire calendar. That's what we would like. And so finding your price home, you're going to start to see some numbers here. You're going to start to see some numbers here. Now you're like, know what? The slow season's coming up. We need to get more bookings. So we apply more pressure and drop our rates. But we don't have to go very far down because our fingers are on the keys, right? This is the concept of finding a price home. And then from there, we can look at whether or not Price Labs really has the whole story, or if GPO really has the whole story. What I find with my students commonly is once we find our price home, there's like a 60-day range that Price Labs was really getting the prices correct, but nobody's getting any bookings 4 months in advance. Nobody's getting bookings inside of 3 weeks. And if you're watching this, you probably know this is true about your listing, right? Is your listing always failing inside of 3 weeks, or is your listing always failing more than 90 days away? You're either not getting far out bookings or you're not getting last minute bookings, right? That's the thing. So now, once we identify that, we can start making changes to the other, we can just target what I call zones. We can just target those zones and make little pricing changes, right? Now that we've got that global price. So if you want to learn about zones, talk to my team, and we could look at your listing and like have an hour-long conversation about your prices, your listings, everything like that. But for those of you that are going to go completely DIY, I want you to create a wish list of your competition, your relevant competition, and I want you to watch that wish list as events come up to see if your stuff is booking or not. Because if Price Labs says triple your rate, but no one in your wish list is getting booked, Price Labs is wrong. But if PriceLab says, oh, there's nothing to see here on any other weekend, but all of your stuff is getting booked, PriceLabs is missing an opportunity and you need to drive your rate up. So PriceLabs is cool, Wheelhouse is cool, they'll change your prices, but again, it's this monkey with the symbols. And we need to constantly be testing to see where it is making guesses, is what we can call it, and whether those guesses are right. And if it constantly makes guesses and it's correct, we can rely on it. But if it's making guesses and it misses half the time, do you really want to rely on that, right? So make a wish list of your competitors, get a journal, and just write down notes of what your prices are doing. And like the stuff that you maybe are suspicious of, be like, you know what, I'm a little suspicious of this. Let me keep an eye on that. And eventually, you're going to see that PriceLabs always behaves a certain way, and thus you're going to make changes to the predictable nature of your pricing software. I think that is the future of pricing in 2025. And yeah, to tell you again, I use both PriceLabs and Guest eGPO, and then I use Airbnb's data to run all of my stuff. So I have 3 points of information that I run. And for those of you wondering why I do stuff in my truck all the time, well, I bought a truck so I can move a lot of pianos. That's one of the things I'm trying to do to be like cool and new, is I'm buying pianos. So like I have a thing that no one has. And then I go to the gym right here. And before I go into the gym, I have my coffee and I think about Airbnb. And sometimes I do a live stream to tell you what I'm thinking about. So I'm gonna take my gym bag, go into the gym, lift some weights, and get back to business. So love you guys, thanks. Hopefully this one doesn't have the weird sound. This is my 3rd live stream in a row because this last one had this buzz that was just made it a pain to watch. So love you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.